All right. Well, good morning, everybody. It's another Thursday, another episode of On the Fly with Kai. And today is January 20th. And we come to you every Thursday, though, at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time and all time zones in between. And it's just always been a fantasy of mine to really bring you the best of the best in their fields to give you some tips, tricks, and hacks for entrepreneurs. And the people I bring to you are really top flight in their field. And I personally know each and every single one of these people that I bring to you. And today is no different. And I'm excited to introduce to you really a global superstar in the speaking and presentation, sales, leadership arena. In fact, I met Elizabeth Bachman about a decade ago, and she was just starting her career with this career. She's had a few pivots in her life, but I was so impressed not only with her business acumen, the way that she carried herself, the fact that she spoke 5 languages, now as an author, an international speaker, but she had an incredible edge, which was her opera experience. And in fact, in that performing arts, she directed folks like, Pavarotti, Placido Domingo, and I think that's been a huge advantage. So everyone, please help me welcome to the stage Elizabeth Bachman. We're happy to have you here, my dear. Thank you for coming.
Oh, thank you, Kai. I was so happy when you reached out and said, "Oh, it's Kai. Yay, hooray."
I know this has really been a great opportunity to remember people and get back in touch with folks and see where they're at. And it's been really fun reconnecting with you too. And so I know we chatted a little bit before the show started, and I didn't realize that you'd had a couple of iterations and always been self-employed. I'd love for you to share with everybody kind of your background and what led you from point A to now where you are at B, C, and now D.
Yes. Well, I like to think that I've been involved with the art of great communication since I first walked on stage at the age of 5.
Wow.
And afterwards, I heard my mom say that I was the best goddamn bunny rabbit ever to grace the stage of the Hillside School. And I thought, oh, this is cool. I can do this. I like this. So I got hooked. I was going to be an actor. I was going to be a famous actor on Broadway. That was the thought until I got to college and I realized that I had been top dog in my school theater department, but so had everybody else.
Wow.
And a lot of them had been much topper dogs than I was. And realized that I was actually a better director than I was an actor. So changed my major. Fortunately, before I moved to New York City and broke my heart trying to get a job, which there were other people who wanted it more and frankly were better. I was a character actor in an ingenue body, basically. And from there, I discovered opera. I'd always loved opera. I just didn't know where you could start. And when I moved to New York City, there were all these little opera companies where you could begin. I had a parallel interest in languages. I was already more or less fluent in French when I got to college, so I started taking Italian to listen to the opera, to please my grandmother, who was a scholar and spoke eight languages, my 5, plus Latin, Greek, and Japanese. So she was way better than I was. So I got into opera and I thought, this is it. This is my artistic home. What that meant was I was an independent contractor, self-employed, since I was 24 years old.
Wow.
So, various jobs that would pay the rent, but most of the time doing gigs here and gigs there. And I did that. I worked my way up through the ranks till I was directing at the Metropolitan Opera and internationally. Then I started an international opera program that was a summer festival, mostly focused on giving young singers a chance to learn. And of those young singers, we had it was German speaking and English speaking singers working together. So it was actually an exchange program disguised as an opera program. Most of them didn't realize until 6 months or a year later, I would get a message saying, "Oh, now I see what you were talking about." And because the international life, living internationally, understanding people from other countries has always been important to me. It's always been something that I really cared about. And then from there, I got to the point where it was getting a little stale. I'd been teaching the same 20 arias to young singers, with the young voices. It's the same 20 arias. And I was getting a little stale. And I realized if I didn't change, I would lose the ability to be moved by the music. And that, of course, is the most important part. So I closed the opera company and went full time as a speaker trainer. I like to see a presentation skills trainer, because that includes then when I was training singers and speakers, it's all presentation and it's all the same. And I've been doing that since 2011, and really, and that feels like everything put together. It's the business training I learned running the company. It's my personal experience with glass ceilings, and the presentation skills. And really, it's the art of great communication since I was a bunny rabbit at age 5.
And that's about when I met you, was right when you were doing that speaker trainer, really focusing there. As long as you stayed healthy, I think COVID did a lot for some of our entrepreneurial brothers and sisters, because, we really were able to carve out, what do we really want? First of all, I want to commend you on taking all those skills that you loved and then parlaying it into a career. So right now, if you're watching this and you're not really happy with what you're doing, pivot, for crying out loud, do something different. Because if you love what you do and you do what you love, you're never going to work a day in your life. And that's what you've done. And I love that. And then during COVID, of course, there wasn't a lot of people speaking in public right then and there. And so I know you've done a fantastic job of taking all of these skills and pivoting and doing some virtual online speaking, which we're going to talk about. But you also started parlaying that into high-level women. So talk a little bit about your niche and how important that is now.
What I discovered, so I was a high-level woman in the opera business to a certain point. Opera companies, like most companies out there, are full of women. Skill and ability gets you to a certain level. But then in a corporate place, it would be senior director. You'd be to a certain point, but the big money still goes to the men. I wanted to run an opera company, and I knew I wanted to run a company. And for about 5 years, I applied for an artistic director or general director job, consistently on the short list, but I always saw the job go to a man. I was so frustrated. I didn't understand why, until later, when I started working the work that I'm doing now, and some of the training that I've done and some of the colleagues that I've worked with made me be able to look back and go, that's what was going on. Basically, I was marketing myself to the wrong people, a combination of marketing myself to the wrong people and the unconscious bias that if you're worried about money, and opera companies are nonprofits, they're always worried about money. If you're worried about money, the tendency is to trust a man before a woman. It's one of those unspoken things, but that's why in tech startups, it's 5% of the money goes to women over and over. It's a very male-dominated industry. What I do now is I work with high-level women in tech and law, which are both male-dominated industries, to help themselves, if they've got a seat at the table, but they still aren't being listened to. And to do that, I spent a lot of time working on different languages. That's the other thing about having worked internationally for so many years. I'm used to translating from one language to another. And early on, when I was studying Japanese, I thought I would go work in Japan. I did a couple of projects that took me to Japan. I met the concept that Japanese has men's language and women's language. There are words and phrases that men use and words and phrases that women use. The more I see other languages, especially English, the more I say, oh, English has that too. It's ways of speaking, styles of speaking. And the big problem comes when you have one way of communicating and you think the other person communicates the same way you do, and they don't. They don't actually hear you, because a woman speaking women's language, talking to a man who's listening with men's language in their brain, is not going to be heard.
So what are some, I mean, I know we probably don't have time to get into all of that, obviously, because this would be a coaching session for a few hours and buy a package in a few sessions. But what are some just maybe top mistakes or top tips that you can give women that, this would be applicable even if you're trying to close a big business solutions deal, right?
Yeah.
So a business enterprise. So talk a little bit about maybe what are some few things that they can learn or pivot with their language and make them more effective in those big deals or at the big tables.
The first thing, the thing I always start with is men, or people, tend to be either single focused or multi-focused. The single focused, more men than women, although there are plenty of women who are single focused. More men than women are single focused. They think about one thing at a time. They do one project at a time. A woman will be multi-focused, will see lots of things at a time and come in and talk to the man about 5 different things. And buried in there is, oh, by the way, could I talk to you about this project? And if the man is focused on his project, he just doesn't hear it. Then the thing that the men need to know is women need to be acknowledged and included. Where one single focused person, you don't hear another single focus, you don't get upset. But so that women have to be acknowledged and listened to. But women, if you're talking to a man when he's focused on something else, he won't hear it. Don't take it personally. It's because it's as if women speak Spanish and men speak Italian. The languages have the same roots. A lot of the words sound really the same, but it's 2 different languages. So you really have to bear in mind, if you're an Italian speaker, you've got to speak Spanish to have them understand you.
So, for instance, maybe you can give just 1 or 2 examples that you see that we could be better at in that communication game. Is there just 1 or 2 things, or maybe it's eye contact, maybe
exactly. Actually, eye contact's not so much. First thing I would say is, if you need to talk to somebody, a man, make an appointment. Make an appointment and just say, I'd like 30 minutes of your time, of your full attention. When would be a good time? Because if you just come in and talk to them, it's always an interruption. Whatever they're doing, even if they're just sorting napkin rings, they're still, they're always busy. So make an appointment. And the great thing is, at that point, you have their single focused attention. That's men and women. Then when you've made the appointment, don't keep talking. That's another thing that women tend to do, is they'll make the appointment and then they'll start telling why and what they wanted to talk about. The single focused person doesn't care. Wait until 4:00 and then you can tell them. The second thing is, be concise. Be clear, concise. Talk about what it is that you want to do in bullet points. Women's language, multi-focused people, fill in lots of extra detail. Single-focused people don't care. What do you need me to do? Get to the point. So those are the 2 things. There's a lot more about it, and I talk about this all the time on my podcast. So if you're interested, there are other places you can find this information.
I love it. We're just giving a little taste of it. What is your podcast?
My podcast is Speakers Who Get Results, because my company is called Strategic Speaking for Results. So Speakers Who Get Results is about leadership, visibility, how do you be heard, presentation skills, also the international communication challenges. And nowadays, we live in an international world, and chances are you're going to be working with people from many countries. If you're speaking English and it's not your first language, or it's the second or third language of your listeners, that's another thing you have to pay attention to.
So just so everyone who's watching this on replay can see that there's the podcast Speakers Who Get Results. And that's a great lead into really what I wanted to talk about today, was how to be more effective and have some rock star virtual presentations, because that's the world we're living in right now, especially with stupid Omicron coming up. Thank you very little. And
Right.
so we talked a little bit about what are some great tips. And I know for those of you who are here listening to this, if you email you can give them the 11 tips for better virtual speaks. Is that going to work? Speeches?
I think I'll have you send it out. You can post it as a on your page.
Great. So
that's
for those
fine. It's a
of you
gift
for coming today, I will post this on the Facebook, which is On the Fly with Kai, and you'll be able to get that as a gift from Elizabeth. So thank you for that. But let's talk a little bit about my favorite subject, which is being a rock star in your virtual presentations, because this is what I'm excited about talking about. So tell me a little bit about how to keep audiences engaged, first of all, because they are you talked about it, they're multi-focused, right?
Yeah, right. Well, and the thing is that you have to assume that people are multitasking. It's so easy to be answering your emails while you're listening, et cetera. So if you are giving a speech, what you want to think about is having people answer in the chat, enter something, to raise your hand, to vote on something, which forces them to pay attention again. Also, one of the problems that men and women have is you start giving your presentation and you've got your slides, and then you start going so fast because you're a little bit nervous. So you're talking so fast that you never actually breathe, and you never pause at the period, and you never pause at a paragraph, and then it becomes just white noise. Slow down. Remind yourself to slow down. Vary your tempo, vary your pitch, vary your pacing. And there are a couple of ways that are easy to do that. Ask questions. If you put a question into your script, that forces you to change the way you change your tone of voice. And I like to think of a speech as similar to a magazine article. Each talking point would have a headline, a sub-headline. So when you have one point, pause to let it finish. If you've got the second point, say the next thing is pacing and tempo. The next thing is, how do you look? I'll get to that in a minute. But tell people when you're starting a new thought, because if they're tuned out, or if they're playing Candy Crush and they're in the middle of winning the game, they might not hear when you move on to another topic, and they say, wait a minute, why is she talking about lighting where she was talking about words before?
I love it. So I have a tendency to talk fast too. So this is something that I need to work on as well. So slowing down, asking for engagement with the chat, all that piece of it. What about how important you're going to talk about image and lighting and all of that? I would love to hear your thoughts on all of that as well.
One of the things that helps a lot. So I'm an entrepreneur. My company is Strategic Speaking for Results. There, it's over there. And so I have a branded backdrop. That's so that people are reminded. They connect my face with the name of my company. If you are in a meeting, or if you're talking to people and you're just working at home, it's really annoying when people can't see your face. You want to make sure that you have lighting at 10 o'clock and 2 o'clock in front of you. I have eye issues, so I can't have a ring light right in front of me. I have to have indirect light. Also, I wear glasses now. I didn't used to, but now I need them all the time. It's also really annoying to have the ring light reflecting off your
Totally.
glasses. So bear that in mind. Also, make sure that you are wearing colors that complement your skin tone, so that you've got make sure that you've got something that will highlight your face, frame your face. I go to professional color consultants to have my colors done, because the person that I work with a lot has she sees so many more colors than I do, that I'm happy to have her advise me. How you look is the way people perceive you first. So pay attention to your lighting. And also, if you're being lit by natural light, pay attention to where the light is at what time of day. Because
Mm.
morning, right now, I face east, and it seems to me that the clouds have cleared for a change. So I've got a little light coming in here, but in the afternoon, it's going to come in behind me, backlight me. The camera's a camera. The camera is going to pick up the strongest light source. So I actually have 3 different lights to fill in enough so that my face is visible.
Yeah, no, I agree. And all we get is the box.
Yep. Yep.
So it's important that, it's forgiving because you can wear whatever you want on the bottom and things like that. But, you just need to put your best foot forward. And I appreciate that. And you look fantastic today, too. I love
Thank
it.
you.
Yeah.
I heard a TV commentator a couple days ago mention that she hadn't worn public-facing pants for 2 years. So, indeed, I have my business outfit here, but I'm wearing sweats underneath, as we all are.
Me too. And slippers.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So, what would you say, for instance, like with PowerPoint and visual aids, because that way they're not looking at you sometimes? How do you feel about all that?
PowerPoint is a very useful tool. The I I work with a graphic artist who makes my slides way better than I do, because I'm really, really good with words and language. I'm not so great with visuals. So I delegate, and I pay the graphic artist a lot to have better PowerPoints, because that's part of the impression that you're giving,
Yeah.
part of how you're coming off. The other thing is less is more with PowerPoints, where you want images rather than words. Use just a couple of words, just a phrase. The killer with PowerPoint is when you have a white background and a whole screen full of text. That's in the business, they call that the eye chart. But fundamentally, you want people to be looking at you, not your PowerPoint. And you want the slide should illustrate you. But if there's too many words, people are going to be peering in to say, what is this that she's saying? And they're not paying attention to what's your message.
And I don't know if this is okay or not, but I really like stopping the PowerPoint from time to time throughout the presentation. So show it and then stop and keep talking without it and then bring it up again from time to time. It seems like,
Absolutely. That's a great tool for engagement, because again, people's attention spans are so short these days that you want people to be paying attention. So if you stop the PowerPoint and you say, now we're going to talk, that's something different. And people go, oh, wait, she's talking. Something happened. So even if they've shrunk you into a little tiny corner down there, and because they're really playing solitaire above, it
so true.
changes the look of the thumbnail. So why not?
Yeah. And I mean, I try a lot of energy too, because I think
Yes.
that that is engaging. But that's funny. What are some other tips is there anything other than just the chat? Because I'll do like an online training and the guy will say, put a 7 in there. And we all put a 7 and it gets kind of old after a while just to like randomly put numbers in there, or letters in there and things like that. Is there anything else other than the chat that we can do that will up the engagement on there? Because I feel like that's getting old too.
Well, I'm a big fan of having spotlights. So actually what I really love is the question and answer period
Mm.
after I've done the presentation, because then you can get someone on who's going to really talk and you see two people talking. That's very good, because so much of what I do is in the moment, how someone is showing up. As a speaker trainer, presentation skills trainer, where what I like to do is have a spotlight, a love seat, as our mutual friend Debbie Hoffman calls it, where you have someone on there and they're trying something and then I can comment. So.
Yes, using that spotlight feature is huge. Like you said, it'll bring two people together or three or four. I love that. How important is like music or microphones or things of that nature?
On a podcast, having good sound is very important. So I have a brand new, very expensive microphone because my old microphone died. So I have a very good, very expensive microphone because I am a podcast host. And the thing people really complain about is not having good sound.
Yeah. And we got to be careful because sometimes I'll put on music that's copyrighted and then it doesn't show up where I need it to show up. So we got to be
Yes.
careful about that too, especially if you're broadcasting somewhere or doing something. How do you feel?
And I actually and one other thing, just as a podcast host, if you're considering starting your own podcast, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. Say that I saw you on Kai's show. I work with a company that does everything for me except finding interesting people and talking to them. So they do everything else. I pay for it. But when I think about what my time is worth, that was the big thing, was to say the time it would take me to figure all this out would basically an hour of my time is twice what it costs me per episode. So, the hours that I would spend finding the right visuals or getting the tech right, when they said, well, all you have to do is find interesting people and talk. I said, I could do that. Yes, would love to do that. So that's, and that has made, I've been with them for 2 years, and that has made a huge difference.
Yeah,
And if
I think
anyone's curious, just reach out to me on LinkedIn and I'll tell you who that was.
I'm going to reach out to you.
Okay.
But I think you really said something I want all entrepreneurs to hear. Don't be afraid to hire it out. Elizabeth hires out the podcast. She hires out the PowerPoint. I think there is a tendency for entrepreneurs. I've seen the biggest mistake I've seen of entrepreneurs is they try to do it all.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Saving $1 and it's silly. It's absolutely silly.
Yeah, it's like saving the pennies to risk the dollars. I think it's the old British saying of
Yes,
spare the penny and lose the pounds.
I couldn't
It
agree.
alliterates better for the English.
I couldn't agree more. We have only a couple minutes left. Is there any final thoughts that you have that you wanted to share with everybody, just as we move forward and we continue to be on a virtual world? Are there any final thoughts that maybe you have about this brave new world we're in?
It's not that new. What's happened is that the rest of the world has embraced video communication. It's not going away. I work with teams when I do corporate programs for teams. We'll have people in 4 different countries.
Wow.
All of them online at once. So that's not going away. It's especially considering, rather than flying somewhere, paying for the hotel and the restaurants and the conference, it's not going away. Conferences, I believe, as they keep going, is going to be more and more for the people who really need to be there in person. If you're selling a product, you probably need to be there in person. But for what I do I'm intellectual property. My stuff is all virtual, so you can do it online. And that's what allowed me to have an international opera company, was through the internet. We didn't have Zoom then, but because of the internet, it was possible to have staff in Austria, staff in the US, and students from all over the world.
Yeah, I mean, you were early to the table with all that, which boded very well for you in this virtual world, and that's why your business has really throve, even though a lot of ones are going down. But I want to thank you so much for being on the show. And if people want to continue the conversation about, maybe how to participate more at these higher levels, or be a better speaker, what's the best way to engage with you?
You can find me on LinkedIn. And if you're curious about how your presentation skills are doing, especially if you're working in an organization, I have a free 4-minute quiz called speakforresultsquiz.com. That's speakforresultsquiz.com. And that's where you can find out where you're strong with your presentation skills and where perhaps a little bit of support could get you the results you need and the recognition that you deserve.
Perfect. Well, I just put that on the screen for everyone on replay. Elizabeth, I want to thank you so much for being on this show. I could sit here all day and continue to chat with you about all this. I loved having you. It was great reconnecting. Appreciate you being here.
You are one of my absolute favorite people, Kai. So I'm delighted.
Well, for everyone else, I want to thank you for joining us for another incredible episode of On the Fly with Kai. We meet here every Thursday at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, all time zones in between, on my business page, as well as on YouTube with On the Fly with Kai. Please reach out to Elizabeth. Thank you so much. Take care, take charge, and we'll see you guys over the top. See you next week.